Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'll be talking to Laurie Winter about her amazing New Zealand and worldwide landscapes. Laurie is a photographer based in Wellington, New Zealand. Photography is her side business, her passion, her creative outlet, and a chance to practice mindfulness and appreciate what incredible scenery she has on her doorstep. She talks about how she feels incredibly lucky to have a hobby that allows her to visit all the most beautiful places in New Zealand, photograph them, and turn these photographs into artworks that capture the essence of the scene that was in front of her. We discuss how she balances a young family with her passion and full-time job, what photography means to her, and how the New Zealand landscape shapes her photography experience. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Laurie. Welcome to the podcast. How are you going?
I'm very well, Grant. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you, even though it might be the second time.
We won't tell anyone.
No, we won't tell anyone that we had a bit of a failure the first time around. But anyway, it's just between you and me. Sounds good. What's the Laurie Winter story? Can you tell me how you got started in photography, how it came to be such a passion?
Sure. So I guess it probably came from my love of the outdoors. So in my teenager years, in my early 20s and into my late 20s, I guess I was really into hiking. And for a long time, I did it sort of as a youth group activity, and I would take teenagers into the bush. And then I started doing some solo hiking as well. And during those times, I really wanted to capture the New Zealand bush, and having seen the likes of Andre Apps and Craig Potton and the beautiful bush scenes that they could do with the the movement of the water and stuff like that, I wanted to replicate that. And I guess I started carrying a camera with me to document these trips that I was doing by myself. Nothing too crazy. I decided I wanted to be like Craig Potton and take some amazing photos of the water. And so I bought a camera, or a better camera, and I decided to learn how to use it. And so I took myself off to night school, and it just developed from there. So I was kind of hooked quite instantly, and really loved being able to go out with my camera and see something beautiful and come home and do a little bit of editing on it and just come up with some really great results. And yeah, the rest is history. Hiking Fantastic. On the back burner, photography on the front now, and don't get quite into the bush quite as often as I'd like to these days with little kids and stuff. But understandable. So where are you now in your photography journey, do you think? Where do you see yourself? I would really like to be able to get back into more hiking and that sort of thing. It's probably not easy at this stage of life at the moment to be able to go away for a few days quite as often as I would like to. But for me, photography is a hobby, and I don't actually intend on making it a career. I've got a career that I really love as my thing, and photography is kind of an outlet for me, a creative outlet, a chance to be by myself at times, mindfulness. But because of fitting in photography into having a young family, or almost teenage kids now who are very sporty and very active, I don't get a lot of time to do it and fit that in around my job. So I guess in the future, the dream will be, when my children are more growing up, is to be able to do more for longer. So maybe not quite so frenetic, but actually being able to go somewhere and then just wait for the right light, or wait for really amazing conditions. At the moment, I feel like I'm trying to squeeze so much into a small period of time that I'm chasing all the time and not always getting the results that I'm after. But it'd be nice to do it in a bit more of a calm way.
Yeah. Well, I've found it tends to be a fairly calming activity. So how does it fit into, I guess, that frenetic lifestyle that you've got with near teenagers, which I personally know can be a handful. I've had 3 girls myself, and when they get to that sort of pre-teenage, there's usually a lot on. How does
there is a lot, and it's interesting because I'm finding my boys, they want me around more than ever these days as they come into their teenage years, which has been a surprise to me, but I'm kind of embracing it at the moment and just trying to be there at their sports games and stuff like that. But I'm very lucky. I have a very understanding husband, and he's understanding because he's also really into the outdoors himself. And so we take turns all year long. He might go away for a week with one of his mates, and they might go hunting, or go on he does much bigger hikes than I did, and so it's a case of taking turns. And we just kind of have to fit around each other. I'm also really lucky through my main employment that they give us 6 weeks annual leave a year. Nice. So I can kind of allocate a little bit to photography and a little bit to family time, and just try and find the right balance there.
Yeah, great.
And then my husband and I argue because we both prefer to do our activities in the autumn and in the winter. So it gets pretty jammed up over that winter season, and that's when the boys are playing rugby as well. So it's it's chaos for half the year, and then I think summer comes around and I kind of relax a little bit, and the camera gets put away for a while.
Sure, nice.
And I can be there a bit more for the boys.
Time on the beach, maybe.
Yeah, that would be nice. It's not warm enough in Wellington for that, but we can dream.
No, I suppose not. Yeah, yeah. Got to go up the Coromandel or up to the Bay of Plenty, I guess.
Yeah, well, our family have a holiday at Lake Tarawera near Rotorua every year around Christmas, and we're just kind of watching at the moment because it's with Auckland family, so we're just waiting to see how Christmas is going to play out this year. Crossing my fingers I can get up there.
I know it's been tough there with the lockdown as it has been here in Australia. We're just coming out of it now, which is nice to see. But I know some people there in Auckland are doing it pretty tough at the moment.
Yeah, they've definitely had enough.
Yeah. I definitely know what it feels like. It was really good when lockdown lifted here, and it was the first opportunity to actually go out and shoot something. So I've taken just about every opportunity that I've had on a weekend to at least get one shoot in on a weekend, which has been nice.
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky in Wellington. I mean, there has been lockdowns, but not like Auckland and the Waikato have had for quite an extended period of time now. So you kind of forget living your day-to-day life, and then you want to meet up with a friend, and your friend's in Auckland or in Waikato, and you kind of realise that people are a bit trapped at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure it'll get sorted out soon, I hope.
Fingers crossed.
So what motivates you creatively? What's the driver behind Laurie Winter's photography?
I've always found myself really fascinated by the beauty of nature. I know that sounds really cliche, but right from being really little, I used to look at pictures of New Zealand, and I always tell the story about my nana and her biscuit tin that had Lake Matheson on it. And, I would sit there looking at this beautiful reflection of these mountains, and I kind of just always felt drawn to it. And I hadn't done a lot of traveling right up maybe until my early 20s around New Zealand, and I'd gone overseas and seen some of the world, but not really seen New Zealand. And when I finally got down to the South Island and spent a bit of time down there, I was like, oh my goodness, I really have to get amongst this a bit more. So there are times where I'll be somewhere taking photos, and it's quite an emotional response for me, like when it's really beautiful and still and nature just looks amazing. That's a really special time. And so I'm driven to try and have those moments, and like I said, life's really busy, so some of it is just about getting away, and I'm a little bit introverted, so having some time on my own or some quiet time with nature's really big for me. It ended up sorry, cutting you off there. Landscape photography is my thing, and I've not really got into anything else, and I think it's just because of that whole nature thing.
Yeah. So do you try to be artistic in terms of your photography, or are you trying to, I guess, capture the reality of the scene that you're looking at?
That's a good question. I'm still pretty new in terms of photography, so it's only been around about 5 years.
Mm.
And I think for the first few years, it was very technical. It was about
Yep.
getting the photograph right and actually just trying to produce something that I really loved. And I think maybe because I have been back to a lot of places recently, I've just found myself in the last year or two being a little bit uninspired by maybe what I've produced in the past and actually really looking for something a bit different. And I'm starting to get some feedback from people saying, oh, that photo was really different to what you normally do. So having a play around with the artistic side is grabbing me more. But I've always said I don't naturally feel like I'm a creative person. I'm quite drawn to the technical side of photography, and
Sure. Okay.
that whole idea of how do you balance a photo,
Yep.
and being able to visualize a scene I find quite challenging. I often can't visualize a scene until I'm actually looking through the viewfinder, and then I'll see
Okay.
what works. So yeah, it's definitely at the moment just trying to think, when I go back somewhere, what can I do this time that was different to last time I was here? And so
So do you find
trying to
yourself
challenge it.
do you find yourself going into the field with a concept of what you want to capture, or do you leave it to the experience that that you're seeing, and it might be great light, or it might be particular weather conditions, a lenticular cloud over a mountain or something, and you just go, okay, that's the shot, and off you go. As you said, you look through the viewfinder to do the final composition, but I guess in planning, do you go out looking to take a particular shot or particular conditions that might be in existence at the time?
I guess I've been very drawn to certain types of conditions. So, I jokingly call myself a bit of a fair weather photographer.
Sure.
And so I think I probably do have in my mind, just constantly trying to get that photo that I have decided in my brain that's what I want. And so it's probably the driver a lot of the time of going somewhere, of these conditions that I've dreamed up in my head that I consider would be, the banger.
Yep.
But I'm getting better at accepting conditions that are less than ideal and working with them as well.
Sure.
So that's probably a challenge for me, particularly when the weather's not good, because it takes a little bit of effort for me to get out there. But having said that, there's been times recently where I've gone out and got something captured that probably wouldn't have grabbed me in the first place, and actually really loved the photo. And I can think of a time quite recently when I went to the Hooker River, and it was a completely clear skies, and it was middle of the day, so it was probably the worst possible conditions for photography. But there was just a band of cloud just hugging the mountain, and I managed to completely crop out the sky and just get this little tiny band of cloud in there, and a lot of river in my foreground. And I got it home and I was like, wow, that's really different to what I would normally have done, and I really loved it. So yeah, I've probably just been a little bit fixated on getting that dream shot, and now trying to make conditions work for me rather than the other way around.
Yeah, sure. I know a lot of people are probably jealous of you Kiwi photographers, because you sort of live in Middle Earth, as people say, and I don't think it's just the landscape. I mean, the landscape is stunning on itself, but you do tend to get quite good conditions there, like anywhere, not all the time, but, quite frequently. And I guess it's relatively small enough that if it's not working in one location, you can fairly quickly get to another location, depending on where you are. If you if you're up in the backcountry, it can take you a little bit of time. But
if you have to hike anywhere, but if you've got some wheels, I've been known to do some pretty insane distances, in one day, to get to somewhere that I've decided I want to be the next day, or that evening for sunset. But you say that New Zealanders are lucky, and we definitely are, and I love taking photos of New Zealand, but there is a lot in Australia that I would love to explore.
I'm very appreciative of where I live, and it kind of leads me to my next question, which is, how much does where you live impact what you shoot?
For me, quite a lot. So Wellington's pretty well known for not having the best weather.
Yep.
And I do find being at home hard to be motivated because, to get anywhere decent, you've got to drive 20 or 30 minutes. And I'm not going to lie, 9.5 times out of 10, you're going to get there and you're going to set up and it's going to be disappointing. So I say it over and over. I really need to do more in Wellington because Wellington's beautiful, but there's the saying you can't beat Wellington on a good day, and then someone will pipe up, well, that's only 3 days a year. So the motivation to do stuff around home is hard, but also home is where life is. Home is where my boys are and work, and so I don't tend to prioritize it. I prioritize these trips where I get to go away for a few days or a week, and then I'm just trying to make the most of that time. But really, it's another area I should be challenging myself to actually, show off my home.
Sure. I don't want to create a North Island, South Island, rift, but which is your favourite?
If anyone said North Island, they'd be lying. I love the South Island. I love mountains and I love lakes and I love reflections and snow. So you can't beat it. But over the last couple of years, I've done a little bit more in the North Island than I have in the past. And, anyone who's not going to the North Island probably is missing out.
Yeah. I'd totally agree. I mean, if, I'm quite into seascaping, obviously, so I find both are quite good for that, depending on where you are and conditions. But I think there's some spots on the North Island that I'd go to before I go to not necessarily say Milford Sound. Fair enough, that's always going to be a mecca. But there's certainly some spots up around Coromandel or Bay of Islands in particular as well, which just the scenery there is absolutely astounding.
And iconic New Zealand in a completely different way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
A good example was just last autumn. Actually, I didn't manage to get down south, and I've been trying to get down south in autumn for the last couple of years again. And Central Otago is the place to be for autumn in New Zealand. But a friend and I went to the Hawke's Bay, and just as good as far as I was concerned. We just had some amazing scenes and beautiful autumn colours, but no one ever associates Hawke's Bay with autumn.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of gems to be had in the North Island.
It's all about Sauvignon Blanc, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one, the wine.
Mind you, that's not too shabby from Hawke's Bay either.
No, it's not. It's not at all. Although I think if I had to pick a Sauvignon, I would have to say Marlborough's your pick.
Definitely.
Yep, and the Otago Reds, can't go past those.
No, definitely not. I'm a big fan of New Zealand wine, but also a big fan of Australian wine. Big fan of wine altogether.
Any wine is good wine.
When you're looking for a spot, what's your go-to? If you've got that 30-minute drive, is there a go-to spot near Wellington that you repeatedly find yourself drawn to?
Probably not within 30 minutes, but if you're thinking more like an hour and a bit, then Castle Point in the Wairarapa is definitely high on the list. But also Cape Palliser at the very, very bottom of the North Island is amazing as well. I think you'd love it for seascapes, and there's a pretty cool red and white lighthouse there, and the pinnacles are there as well. But that's also, you've got to go quite a long way around and over the mountains to kind of get there. Appreciating Lake Wairarapa recently as well, so that's another good spot. But home, what I really want to capture in Wellington is more of those iconic Wellington scenes, the south coast and the view of the city from Mount Victoria Lookout. I mean, I live here, I should have heaps of those photos, but I don't yet.
So there's still a lot of places in Sydney that I'm sort of going to and finding new angles. Everyone's got the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge and the city in general. But I'm trying to find new and different angles for it, and for me that's a bit of a challenge, because it's those icons are iconic, for a reason.
For good reason, right? Yep.
And they're all very photogenic, and the harbour's a great place to shoot. But just trying to find new and different places to get around to. It's I think it's a good way of challenging yourself, and getting into thinking about new and different ways of photographing where you live. Because to me, I think it's important to do that. There's so much change has gone on, certainly, in my lifetime here in Sydney. And, you look back at some of those old shots from the 60s when I was born, and the 70s and whatever, and the skyline itself has totally changed,
It's totally different, yeah.
And, you look back at those shots, and you do those comparisons and whatever. And I think it's important to record that sort of stuff. Even ordinary street scenes, just looking at the fashions and the types of cars and that are still around. I think it's really important to record that, if nothing else, just so you can show your kids, well, this is what it was like back in 2021.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I was looking. I grew up in a seaside suburb of Wellington, and didn't know how lucky I was, but a tiny little cottage just my mum and I lived in for a few years, like literally a 1-bedroom cottage, and across the road was the beach. And I just kind of took it for granted that's where I lived. And I've been around there a few times and taken a few photos, and I really wanted to get a photo for my mum of the area, and I haven't really quite nailed what I wanted. I went for a drive around that area the other day, and our little cottage is gone.
Oh, wow.
So it's been replaced by a great big whopping townhouse. And I felt really sad that I hadn't gone and got a photo of my old house. You kind of just think it's always going to be there, but
that's
not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I've never done, actually, and you saying that's kind of prompted the thought. Probably you should go and have a look and see what the old place look like.
Yeah,
it might not be there as well. Yeah. No. So when you're out in the field, is there something that you're looking for, I guess, in terms of your composition? Obviously, foreground elements and so forth. And a key subject, but what are the things that I guess do catch your eye when you're out in the field?
Well, I say it all the time. Anything that's got a reflection in a mountain, I'm there. And if you can get some cute little strategically placed rocks, and that's great as well. Again, it sounds a little cliche, but I just I find it really calming seeing those scenes. But I also just am trying to embrace a little bit more of the whole moving water thing. Mm-hmm. And I would love to do some more seascapes. I am a little bit afraid of the ocean. Sure. I talk about growing up opposite a beach, but it was a very calm, sheltered beach, and I never really had any experience with rocks and waves, and it still makes me nervous. But the other thing I look for is bold color. Like I really enjoy a vibrancy in photos. So if there's a real contrast between the grasses and the sky and the trees and the water and anything like that, then I really love those contrasts and those strong colors and actually bringing those out. So that, again, that's why the South Island shines, because you've got those beautiful contrasts and the greens and the golds and the blues.
Yeah, and white on the snow on the mountains against the black.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. And there's no cloud.
Yep.
Yeah. So for people that don't know the area, what are conditions? I know they call it windy Wellington. But what are conditions normally like around, where, not just where you live, but where you normally shoot? What sort of conditions can people expect if they're there?
Well, it's almost always windy, so that's not an exaggeration. We have actually our calmest time of the year tends to be in winter when the temperatures are dropped. And so, if I'm wanting to get maybe a cityscape and, with the lights on and the reflections in the harbour, then pretty much you're kind of confined to winter to be able to get something like that.
Oh.
And spring, of course, we're going through it now, but it's just relentlessly windy. You're talking gales every second day. So yeah, us Wellingtonians, we have to love the wind. For seascapes, people love it because it creates that awesome wave movement. The other thing that always kind of winds me up about Wellington is it can be a really nice day, windy of course, but with beautiful high cloud around, and you'll set yourself up at sunset and you think this is on, and then from the Cook Strait this band of low grey cloud often rolls across the hills and out west and blocks that setting sun, and you're like, oh, not again. But that rolling grey cloud is very common in summer, in the warmer months. That aside, the good things about Wellington, we're a harbour city. The whole Wellington area is quite walkable.
Yep.
One of the things I say is it's really lucky that Wellington's weather's not so great, because otherwise everyone would want to live here. So from a city point of view, I absolutely love living here and no plans to move. But from a photography point of view, it challenges me.
With your photography, you said you went, or your education, I guess, around photography. You said you went and did night school. What was the course, and what did that entail, and what do you think that taught you?
Yeah, my experience with night school was quite interesting. So I'd never done a night school before, and we'd had a crop sensor DSLR for a few years, and I'd found it heavy, and like I said, I wanted to take a camera hiking, and so we'd done some research, and I ended up with an Olympus camera, so very small mirrorless that you could pretty much put in your pocket. And so I decided that I wanted to learn how to use it properly, and take some of these photos that inspired me. And so yeah, I signed up to just a high school night class, and I found it kind of awkward, to be honest. So my tutor that I had was a bit of a traditionalist, and I got a sense very quickly that mirrorless he was not terribly impressed with the camera that I'd come along with. And also, I'm quite a perfectionist, and I worry about getting things wrong. And so I'd sat there before this course reading about settings and reading about how to use my camera, and I kind of felt that I got to this course and they were teaching the basics, and had I not been learning it, I would have learned it on the course. But then I kind of found myself going, I've kind of taught myself what I needed to know anyway. So I kind of consider myself self-taught. And joining Instagram was actually a big part of that as well. So I joined Instagram originally to show off some of this hiking that I was doing, and then I fell towards the photography, and there were photographers who were sharing their settings, and like Rach Stewart for a long time was a really big mentor to me. She told me, would explain how she used her filters, and we kind of bonded because we were both mums with young kids. She was fitting photography into that lifestyle as well, and she gave me some really good tips, and then I met my friend who's kind of my photography bestie now, Megan Maloney, and her the same, 2 young boys and fitting photography around that. And I found a lot of people really willing to tell me about what settings they used and what equipment they used and stuff like that. And, I was able to start replicating that and experimenting. And, with things like long exposure photography, if you don't have someone telling you that, it's quite hard to kind of figure out.
There's a lot to experiment with, and a lot of mistakes you can make to
I can still remember sitting on a beach, and I'd been on a hike. I'd done the Abel Tasman with a friend, and we were down there in Kaiteri, and I was trying to take a long exposure of the ocean, and I didn't have any filters, and it wasn't nighttime, and so of course it didn't work, and I couldn't really conceptualize why that was. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but I had some really good people helping me out, which was really nice.
It was kind of like when I discovered bracketing. Start and using luminosity masks to exposure blend, so that you could not just manage that width of dynamic range, but also, manage the ability to take a longer exposure through, stopping down and stopping up the settings, so that you've got a range of that movement that you can actually blend into the image as well. And
changes everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's those sorts of things that I guess change everything for anyone that's learning to shoot. You've got to put the time in, but you also need advice. And I guess on that, you mentioned Rach Stewart. I guess, is she one of your go-tos? And Megan, is she one of your go-tos for advice, or don't you feel you're needing that as much now?
Rach is very busy these days, very,
Sure.
very famous, of course, in New Zealand. She's done so incredibly well. So, no, I think she set me up really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of what I try to teach myself these days is falling onto YouTube kind of thing, and having a look. And there's so many people sharing their knowledge. It's quite accessible to find
Sure.
really good tutorials and really good free tutorials to be able to help yourself. Megan and I, we work very well together when we go on a trip and take photos. We're very similar in the way we approach things, and so her and I recently have been trying to get our Astro a little bit better. And
Mm-hmm.
we're never going to be right up the top with all the equipment, because I'm not ever going to go down that path of carrying all the things you need to do to be phenomenal. But I definitely was thinking, a lot of these photos are noisy and my foreground's not sharp. And so we've been spending a lot of time thinking, well, how can we make it better? And having some success with that, which has been really nice.
No, that's good.
So for me, finding some people who, shoot the same way and enjoy hanging out, and, there's a handful of other people that I'll travel with or meet up with as well. And I learn something from all of them, and always learning something.
Yeah, I certainly think it's great when you can be part of a, even if it is only small, but a community of like-minded people, that, you can get out and, find new places or find new techniques, and, bounce ideas off one another, makes all the difference, I think.
Yeah. And, there's some incredible photographers in the New Zealand community who,
I know,
I look at and I'm just, I've got so much more to learn and so far to go. But that's great. But, really, really inspiring stuff, which is cool.
So when you're thinking about going out for a shoot, how long do you sort of gestate on the concept, and how long do you plan? Do you plan? I know some people just go out and shoot when conditions are right. They look at the weather report and go, "Yep, it'll be good," and off they go. Is that your style, or do you tend to sit there and look months and days ahead and say, "Okay, well, it's going to be like this around that time. That's when I'm going to go"?
I kind of have to be. So, just thinking
Sure.
back to trying to juggle my time with my husband and share nicely, play nicely in the sandpit. So my trips will be booked months in advance. And I will be, I'll be thinking, okay, well, winter's going to be best for this area, and autumn's going to be best for this area. And I would say, yes, I plan, but also I don't. So the plan is always really fluid. But in some respects, probably over planning. I spend a lot of time looking at the weather forecast and trying to second guess nature and decide where I'm going to be best to put myself the next morning or whatever. And finding, of course, that it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And so maybe a little bit more of going down and heading to a region and being prepared to stay, even if the forecast isn't what you think is the best, because that's where you get some really interesting conditions. And it keeps coming back to me thinking, oh, I've only got 2 weeks of photography time a year. I really want to be able to get not only content, but stuff for my website and things that are different. So it can feel like I'm under a lot of pressure at times, and that can affect the enjoyment. But I definitely wanted to spend more time staying put and just taking what nature gives me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because, the more time you've got, the more time that you take, obviously, if you're on a tour schedule or whatever, you kind of got to be somewhere at a certain time. It's hard to do. But if you do have the time and the luxury of spending, an extra day or two, in a location, it can really make all the difference to what you end up taking home.
Yeah. The thing that makes me jealous is the people who can see an aurora forecast and jump on a plane kind of thing. I'm nowhere near a stage in my life where I can do that sort of thing, but that's the future dream, to
Yeah,
be able to
I'd
say,
like
oh,
to be there. But,
yeah, there's a snowstorm coming. 2 days later I'm on a plane and I'm going to go down and chase that weather. I really wish I could do that, but one
yeah,
day I'll get there.
fair enough. Fair enough. I guess what drives what you look for in a location? What are the things that you're you mentioned mountains and reflections. So, obviously a good lake or a nice still day are the things that you're looking for. But I guess when you're doing your planning, what are the things that you're looking for weather-wise as well?
I think these days I'm a lot more focused on trying to go to areas of New Zealand where I haven't been before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like I'm really lucky. I've seen a huge amount of New Zealand, but there are actually some regions that I've never managed to get into. So they're quite high on the list in terms of where I would like to plan to go. But it's I'm torn in two because there's so many amazing locations that I haven't got the photo I want from. And so,
Sure.
I want to go back there as well.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself going back to the same places quite often. And they become like a little bit of a second home. You've become so familiar with it that it's quite comforting to go to some of those
Yeah.
places. And
Yeah.
you don't have to think too much about researching compositions and researching, even where you can park your car in the morning,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which, can make it easier to kind of choose those places. But I do want to be going to new places and trying to see New Zealand through new eyes, I guess, and get something that's a bit different.
Cool. Do you print your work?
I don't print enough of it, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I print for other people,
Yep.
and I've got photography available for sale on my website, and I sell a little bit. And I'm always, when I pick up a print, I'm like, wow, I should do more of this for myself, and
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
don't. But my husband and I are coming towards the end of a full renovation of our house, all
Yep.
cosmetic, but there's new paint and there's new opportunity to put some pictures up. And, I said to my husband, when we get something framed, I'm going to print some of my photos, but when we get them framed, I don't want them framed in a way that I can't change them out.
Yep.
Because I've had some framed photos in the past, and then you take the back off and it's like all glued down beautifully, and it's fantastic. But I want to be able to chop and change it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've made a commitment to myself to print more of my own photos. But I also, I purchased one of Dale Sharp's prints
Okay. Yep.
for my living room, which will kind of be, the main art in that room. And so trying to get a little bit of other people's art is really appealing to me as well.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So when you are printing, what are you looking for from your print provider? I mean, I'm assuming you're not printing your own stuff on your own printer at home.
No, I'm not. I was approached by a printer in Wellington not so long ago, and he said, I really want to print your work, which was really lovely to hear.
Yeah.
And I kind of said to him, well, it's not going to be a lot of business, but, I switched my printer to this gentleman, and he does really beautiful prints and expanded my horizons in terms of papers to use and that
Yep.
sort of thing, and what mediums. But I take a lot of advice from him, so I'll often send him the photo saying, well, this is what my customer wants, what would you suggest? And I trust him to choose the right paper for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But obviously printing on cotton rag a bit more than I used to, and like it changes the dynamic of the photo so much
Mhm.
that some of the ones I've printed recently, you'd look at them and you'd swear they were a painting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm quite enjoying seeing some more of that. And he prints my calendars every year, and I was just chatting to someone who's also doing calendars the other day, and they were like, oh, I'm so sick of the holes not being punched properly or something not lining up. And I was like, oh man, it makes me feel really good about my printer, because he just does a great job. And so
I think that relationship between the photographer and the printer is really, really important. And if you're not talking to, I mean, there's hundreds of websites now that you can just dump and pay your money and you'll get sent a print, which may be totally fine for what many people are doing. But I think if you want to get, as you said, that painterly quality and that that really high quality paper and everything, that relationship is really important, especially when it gets down to things like color matching and so forth, where you want to make sure that that final product is pretty much exactly as you envisaged it on the screen. And
totally. And he knows that I love the color as well, so don't give me anything wishy-washy. I want it to really pop. So he does a great job there.
No desaturation for
not for me.
What's the most memorable experience you've had while out shooting?
Gosh, that's really hard. I would probably say the time I went to Lake Huron in the Ashburton Lakes, and I went with a friend, and it was the very first time that I'd taken an astro panorama.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what I was doing, really, and somehow that photo, I pulled it off, and that was a finalist in the Sony Awards that year for astro, and I was really, really proud. So it was such an amazing night. It was so still, and I thought for a little bit that I had my white balance set incorrectly. Well, there was something wrong with my camera, because the air glow was so strong, and I'd never experienced it quite like that, like a really vibrant purple color. Anyway, pulled this photo off, and all 50 of the photos I took managed to stitch. Pretty much everyone I've done since then, I've not been able to stitch them properly. So beginner's luck. I talk about beginner's luck all the time. So it's memorable because it worked, and I got this photo that I really loved out of it. And just sometimes being there in the dark and the silence under the stars, it's pretty special. So that stands out as a pretty cool moment.
Nice, very nice. How about horror stories? Have you had any real failures or any real sketchy experiences, I guess?
Yeah, I think horror stories all the time. I can't think specifics, but there's so many times I come home and I kick myself, like thinking, what was I thinking? Not why did I use the polarizer then? I didn't need that. And so I kick myself because I think I make a lot of mistakes. But I don't know. I think I've been pretty lucky. I've put myself in some scary situations on my own. And another astro time, actually, last year, I was shooting at a church, and I couldn't quite fit what I wanted in the frame. And so I hopped into this overgrown field just behind me, and it's completely silent, and I'm shooting, but I could hear all of the critters in the grass. And I was just terrified. And there was a cemetery over the back of the church. I'm like, well, I can't go around that side because the ghosts will get me. So the imagination's going pretty wild sometimes there in the dark. And but I'm lucky I've not had any major accidents. I've taken a couple of tumbles at time and thought, oh sheesh, that was lucky. But touch wood, no disasters.
Yeah, well, I guess it's one thing I'm very wary of is getting into overgrown locations here, because the critters here are likely to kill you.
They'll kill you, yeah. Whereas I'm probably
worrying
New Zealand,
about they might have a nibble at you, but
some poor little mouses, and I'm disturbing its house, and there I am freaking out. But no, there'd be no chance in Australia. My family and I went on holiday to down to the Great Ocean Road a couple of years ago, and we stayed in this, like an Airbnb, and we'd got this old 100-year-old old schoolhouse. And it was beautiful, but all around the outside was long grass. And I said to my son, who must have been about 7 or 8 at the time, I was like, no, don't go into the grass because snakes. Well, he wouldn't even go outside for 3 days. That was it. He was inside, and I was like, yeah, well, don't look up in the corner at the spider up there. Don't touch that one. But yeah, he was absolutely terrified, and I wouldn't be walking in the grass in Australia either.
Yeah, it depends on where you are, but yeah, I remember my sister-in-law from the UK for many years. It took her husband quite a few years of convincing to come and have a visit, and when they finally did, she loved it. But yeah, that was one of her greatest fears, was all the spiders and snakes and sharks and anything else that.
And she probably didn't see any of them, right?
No, didn't see one of them.
I mean,
I've used to be a Boy Scout, used to go hiking. I still go hiking quite a bit, and I think in the wild I've seen a total of 3 snakes.
Do you know what gets me about Australia though?
57 years,
It's the leeches.
Oh,
you look at people going to shoot waterfalls, and then they come home and something's sucking the blood out of them.
Yeah,
and they're just casually like, oh, okay, yeah, I just need to get that one off me. I'm like, nah.
Yeah, they're a little unpleasant, those little vampires. They the thing is, you can't feel them either, because they inject a anaesthetic along with sucking the blood out of you. And they inject 2 things. It's an anaesthetic and an anticoagulant. So
right,
it keeps the blood flowing well for quite some time after you've pulled them off. So
wow,
once you get them off, you're going to bleed for a little bit.
Yeah, probably not many Australian waterfalls in my future.
Yeah, no, I don't mind. I've been fairly lucky with that. It's not something that I've experienced too often. I've not saying there's none, but been lucky that I haven't been covered with them. And some people I've seen, they've come back with about a third of their body just covered with little leech bites. So
let's talk about something else.
Definitely. So what do you think you've learned about the world through photography?
What have I learned? Because I really enjoy the long exposure, I've learned some patience.
Sure.
And to just when you're waiting for a photo to be taken, what have you got to do but to look around and really appreciate where you are? And I think probably there are times where I appreciate it a lot more than other people I know, because I'm forced to just wait and enjoy it at times. And I've learned a little bit of, I guess, forgiveness of myself, because sometimes those long exposures come out and your screen's still completely black at the end of it. And you're like, I've just missed all the best light, and I'm not going to get that back. So there's been times where I've been kicking myself, but then I've learned to let that go a bit and go, well, that was a mistake, and what can I do better next time?
That's great. Have you ever hit a creative wall? And if so, how did you handle it?
I feel like I hit them quite a lot, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably my photography journey is a bit of a roller coaster, whereas, I've had a bit of luck and I'm suddenly really enthusiastic again and passionate about it. And then maybe I've gone on a trip and I've got no photos whatsoever, and I'm like, oh, I know, what's the point? All this expensive gear and it's not doing anything. But it's probably seasonal. Like I do this season in Wellington in spring, when it's really windy, I struggle quite a lot with the motivation to take photos, and I haven't taken a photo since August. So that kind of puts in perspective, probably in a bit of a creative block at the moment, and I'm just hoping once I get that camera out, and my experience is you get the camera out and you get an amazing photo and you're like, why did I not pick my camera up for 4 months, and then all of a sudden it's all back on and you're enjoying it again.
I tend to find it when processing, particularly the shots that you sort of you skim through and you go, I might get back to that one, and then you go back to it and you look at it and you go, I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah, I find editing hard because it's not the passion for me. For me, the photography is being out there and experiencing the nature, and coming home and doing the editing is the work, and quite often I've got a vision for what I want this photo to look like, but then you go, oh well, I've now got to sit here for an hour or however long it takes to try and create it. And I'm really notorious for dumping all of the photos into Lightroom or whatever, and I'll do a cull, and then I'll go through and I'll do 3 minutes of editing on that photo. I'm like, yep, that's a keeper, I'll keep that. Right, the next photo, and then I do 3 minutes of that, and next thing you know, I've got hundreds of photos that have had 3 minutes of editing each. And I never go back and finish them. It's just terrible. I've got so many photos waiting to be edited and not really feeling that inspired to go and do them.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. I've got a number of panos that I've taken over the years that I'll stood there, took the pano deliberately. Occasionally I'll pull it out and go, okay, now's the time, and you get stuck in and you get it done. But I've probably got about 30 or 40 of them just sitting there waiting. For me to actually stitch them together and make sure that I've got all the lighting and everything right in each of them. And just rarely ever happens.
Obviously do a fair amount of the focus stacking as well, and so between each set of photos I take a photo of my hand in front of the in front of the camera, which is designed to show me that that's the end of that series of photos. Sure. But then I download my photos and I've got 50 photos of my hand in the mix. I'm like, I just can't even deal with this. Shut Lightroom down, and it's full of photos of my hand.
I've learned to count by fives, because I've got my set up to shoot sort of 5 exposures when I'm bracketing, and so I tend to do that. So it does get a bit weird though when I get out the 10-stop filter and go to bold mode, and then I might only take 3 or 4 or 2 depending on what the lighting's like.
And then you're like, where's that photo gone? What did I do with it?
Exactly. Anyway, so what piece of kit can't you live without?
Probably my 24-70 lens. When I started photography, it was always the 16-35. It was always very, very wide. But I just love the 24-70, and the more panos I've done, I don't need that width anymore. If I want to fit more in, I'll just take extra photos. So I love that photo, and my tripod as well, of course. I doing a lot of long exposures, but also just to try and be able to visualize that scene. And I just use my tripod quite a lot, probably more often than I need to be fair. Camera, 24-70, and my tripod, and I can go off and take some photos.
Fair enough. Do you see social media, I guess, as your main platform for getting the word out about your photography, or do you do a lot of word of mouth, or how do you sell prints? I guess how do you get the word out about what you do?
I think social media has played a huge part for me. I kind of consider myself a bit lucky. From when I joined Instagram, it was when it was in that big growth period, and people struggle these days, but I found it quite easy to grow very quickly, and I've got a huge number of a huge number of followers. But ignoring all of those followers who never engage with you, I have a really good core number of people who have been really supportive of me the whole way through. And then a lot of friendships as well. I struggle with social media these days. I've really got to push myself to do it. It's harder and harder to get yourself out there with algorithms and that sort of stuff. And so it's not that instant gratification so much anymore. I keep my focus these days is just trying to build my website, build the SEO on the website, so that if people are looking for something in particular, they're going to find it through my site. And I do find probably a lot of what I sell these days has been found by Google. And quite surprising, like I have sold a few prints in the last couple of months where I've kind of put them on my website to fill it out, particularly in Wellington. Oh, I don't have a lot of Wellington photos. Okay, I'm just going to throw these ones up as well. And they've sold. And it's been something specific that someone's looking for because it's a meaningful place to them.
Yeah.
And so I don't find myself selling the Mount Cook photos as much as I find myself selling Pukerua Bay, for instance. You like a little bay in Wellington.
Yep.
Yeah, so Google I need to make Google a bit more of my friend. But the social media, like I said, there are people there that have supported me right from when I joined in 2016 or whenever it was. So, I keep sharing my stuff for them as well. But, social media's got a lot to answer for these days. It creates
Absolutely.
a competitiveness, and it contributes to the over-tourism side of things as well. So there's the light side and the dark side.
I was going to talk about some of the dark side of things. I mean, have you noticed in some of the locations you shoot that there has been impacts on the environment from, obviously overcrowding or overshooting as one term for it, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. You've only got to look anywhere there's a fence, right? And see what's happening just on the other side of the fence. And it's pretty disgraceful, to be honest, where these fences are, they're either protecting private property or they're protecting the environment, and people don't seem to put much respect into a fence these days. And so it can be frustrating. We've had COVID for the last couple of years, so I've really seen less people everywhere I go, which is quite nice. But it's people talk about the over-tourism in New Zealand, and we certainly went through a period where there was a lot, and people were just going to the iconic places and skipping the others, which from my point of view was frustrating. But then probably the worst experience I've ever had with over-tourism was at the 12 Apostles in Australia. And I was visiting the region over Easter, so of course it was going to be busy, but it was just outrageously shoulder to shoulder, and people jumping fences and people flying drones when they weren't supposed to. And you think, 90% of these people here are trying to get a shot for Instagram. And, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where, and I know, it's almost impossible to, you can not geotag somewhere like the Great Ocean Road, but, if you're taking a shot of the 12 Apostles, there's not many other places that look like it. So
that's right.
People are going to find it. So I think, as photographers, yes, we've got a bit of a responsibility for, some of that. And, so I've certainly stopped geotagging quite a lot of mine, unless it's somewhere, Sydney Opera House. Well, you're going to be standing on concrete to look at it anyway. So
that's right.
Probably the environmental impact isn't going to be that bad, but it is a bit different when you're going to, say, a little waterfall in the Blue Mountains. I'll just say, yes, this is in the Blue Mountains, but that's all I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. But there's the pushback for that too, right? There was somewhere just recently that I posted, and it's not a well-known location. And so someone asked me, multiple people asked me where it was, and I don't want to be rude. Like, I don't want to say I don't want to tell you, because there is a balance there. And so I gave the region, and the photo was such that you only had to Google a couple of keywords in the region and you would find where you needed to be. And I had a really lovely person who was like, oh, thanks for that information. And then swoop in behind them, someone came and named the location. And, there was quite an aggressive post to me that, well, why are you not telling people? It's very selfish of you photographers. And, I kind of got into a little bit of an argument, but you're wasting your breath. But I also, sometimes I get a bit snippy and I'm like, well, I'm a photographer, I'm not a tour guide. It's not my responsibility to be feeding locations to you. And if you want to do your research, you're going to find some of these amazing places or other different amazing places. But certainly people see it as being selfish with locations rather than trying to protect locations. And if you say you're trying to protect them, not necessarily do people believe you anyway.
No.
So definitely the dark side.
Definitely. What about other dark sides? I mean, that you mentioned competitiveness. It's interesting. I mean, I've spent a bit of time in Instagram, a little bit of time, not as much, but on Facebook and so forth. And there tends to be more competition, I guess, in that realm. It's been interesting seeing the experience on Twitter recently, particularly in the photography community. I mean, I started on Twitter 2011, something like that. And yes, I used it largely as a news source more than anything at that time, because yes, there were some photographers on there, but you occasionally saw their work, and you kind of have to go and seek it out because not many people are using it. But it has changed in the last sort of 12 to 6 months. And really starting to see communities of photographers starting to gather there, which I've found quite interesting and slightly unusual. I think part of that's the advent of spaces where you can actually talk to people, which is something that Instagram and Facebook, other than Messenger, really didn't give you the opportunity, to actually have a conversation and find out what this person is like. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn, because I think social media does have its problems in terms of that, competition angle versus that community angle. What's your experience with it in terms of, competition versus community?
Maybe it's not so much competition. You do sometimes see people getting snippy with each other, and it can be cliquey. So there's a group of people who
Definitely.
are friends, and the bits I don't like is when you've got a few people who are mates, and they don't like something someone's posted. And a classic example is, I don't like this either, when people post photos of Mount Cook and they've distorted it to make it look taller. I mean, Mount Cook's beautiful just as it is.
Yeah.
But you do sometimes see people swoop in, and everyone piles on, and it bothers me, because I don't think people deserve to be torn to shreds in a public forum.
No.
On the flip side, I have heard a lot of people say some really good things about Twitter, and I haven't gone into that space myself. At the moment, creative block, busy. I don't feel like I've got the time to fit another social media channel into my life at the moment, and maybe I'll dabble in it later. But yeah, a lot of people are saying that those spaces are really good, and they've had some really amazing conversations with people, and they think it's really supportive. I have also seen some other sides of it where, people are saying, "Oh, hey guys, I'm on Twitter, but nobody's giving me any response, and nobody's liking what I do." And so mental health and the pressure to compete is still there on Twitter. And a lot of people say, "Oh, it's an amazing place," but I don't think it's amazing for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree and totally get that. The algorithms play their part, but I think also each individual plays their own part. It's like anything. If you shout into the void and you don't hear anything back, you're going to feel quite isolated.
Feel lonely, right? Yeah, totally.
That's right. And being the herd animals we are, it's
and that I think is not, it's not just Twitter, it's social media in general.
Absolutely.
There's the light side and there's the dark side, for sure.
Definitely. What advice would you give to the 10-year-old Laurie Winter if you were able to?
My 10-year-old Laurie Winter needs a lot of advice about a lot of things, but about photography, I would probably say believe in yourself a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've spent a lot of time taking photos and comparing myself to others and saying that photo's not up to standard, and probably still do it myself. So that's a constant dialogue I have with myself to actually believe what you're producing. I'll go through periods where I won't post because I think, oh, nobody's going to like that photo. That photo's not up to my normal standard. So definitely, don't compare yourself to others. Enjoy what you do. enjoy the photography for the chance to get into nature and to experience that mindfulness, and probably do it a bit more often than you're doing it. Get into it earlier. That would be the advice I'd give. Yeah.
Excellent. So what is the best thing about being a photographer?
For me, it is seeing beautiful places and being able to document it, not having to rely on my 42-year-old memory these days to remember it. And photographs, they're a legacy as well, and I'm just starting to find that my children are looking at my photos and appreciating them, and they've never given them two thoughts in the past, but you become a bit of a role model for your children. They look at my photos and go, "Oh, Mum, did you do that?" And that's really nice as well. So bit of a legacy and stuff like that.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. What would be the worst thing about being a photographer in your mind?
Early mornings. Early mornings with rubbish skies and the light not doing what you want. I got asked recently if I could invent a piece of equipment, what would it be? And I was thrown. I couldn't actually think of an answer, but afterwards I was like, oh, of course it'll be something, an accurate sunrise predictor, because I really love to sleep in the morning and I hate getting up. So if I could have something that would tell me when the sky was going to be just what I wanted, that would be amazing.
What would you tell somebody that's just starting out in landscape photography? What tips would you have for them?
Take lots of photos and make all those mistakes and don't get dejected by them, because the first part is hard, and trying to figure out what sort of photography you are going to be and what your aesthetic might be. Just take lots and lots of photos and then decide. I guess a lot of people say to me, how do I become a photographer? Don't try to become a photographer. Just go out and enjoy using your camera and learning that way, and then you'll find yourself as a photographer.
Yeah, cool. That's great advice. What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
I like spending time with my children, of course. I like watching them play sport. I do a little bit of running. So, I have a bunch of friends and we run together. I did hurt myself when I did a marathon a few years back, and so I haven't been able to do quite as much as I used to, but trying to be physically active as well. At the moment, I feel like all I do is renovate my house. So that's taking up a lot of time, and I started a new job recently as well. So I feel pretty busy. Photography is the main creative passion, and then all those other things. And if there's any time left over, I'm going to have a nap.
Yep. Nice. Who do you think I should be talking to on the podcast? Are there any other photographers out there that you think I should get on?
Yes, there's a couple. So I have a fellow Wellington photographer called Ryan Dominico, and he has just moved to Queenstown actually, so you'll have to chase him down there. But he has, I really love the authenticity of his photos, and he's into climbing and he's really into hiking in the outdoors, and he just plays with really beautiful golden light. And I'm excuse me, I'm always really wowed by his photos. And another one that I would have to recommend, who I'm really enjoying at the moment, is Douglas Thorne. And he does, he's Fiordland based, a lot of wildlife down there, a lot of the birds, really, really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of Douglas's work, and he's on my list. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, hunt him down. He's a nice guy too.
Excellent. I've got one last question, and it's probably the most important one. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I love pineapple, but don't know about pineapple on pizza. Like, I'll tolerate it, but I wouldn't choose it.
Fair enough.
Can we still be friends?
Yeah, of course. I'm a neutral. I probably wouldn't order a ham and pineapple myself, but if it's there and I'd eat it. But if it's
My
not there,
11-year-old
I'll eat
boy will only eat Hawaiian pizzas.
it.
And I'm like, come on. There's all these amazing toppings that you could have, and you were choosing Hawaiian. So,
Yeah. So non-traditional, but
yeah.
it's the thing, and it's there, and it's very important that we get to the bottom of who likes it and who doesn't. I think.
Oh, so have you got some stats you can produce yet, Grant?
I probably do. I haven't actually gone through and done them, but I should.
Oh, yep. Well, I'd be interested in the update.
Yeah, I might publish it one day. An in-depth study of landscape photographers'
Yeah, who likes
preferences for
pineapple?
pizza toppings. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking to me, Laurie. It's been absolutely a joy to catch up with you, and fantastic to hear about how you do what you do. Where can people find your work?
If you Google my name, Laurie Winter, you'll find me. So I'm Laurie_Winter on Instagram and Laurie Winter Photography on Facebook and on my website.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Laurie.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.